Papa Doug sells his baby. The company that owns the Los Angeles Times buys UT San Diego from developer Doug Manchester. Leaky roofs, stifling classrooms, long lists of needed repairs. San Diego schools have billions for such fixes, so why new athletic facilities move up the priority list? And sewer backups closed several Balboa Park museums last Sunday. How long will we continue to neglect the city's crown jewel? I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer. And joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, our business columnist Dan McSwain of UT San Diego. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Mark.
Good to have you back. San Diego education reporter, that is, Mario Corran, of Voice of San Diego. Hi, Mario.
Hey, Mark.
And Gene Cubison, political reporter for NBC7 San Diego. Hi, Gene.
Good to see you, Mark.
Good to see you. Well, the big news this week was in the news business. Developer Doug Manchester's controversial reign as owner of UT San Diego is ending. The company that owns the Los Angeles Times, along with the Chicago Tribune and the Baltimore Sun and other publications, has bought the newspaper, and it happens to be San Diego's oldest company. Dan, let's start with the deal itself. Give us the high points. How's this thing going to be structured?
Well, the selling price was $85 million. $73 million in cash goes to Manchester, and $12 million in stock. And that does not include the Mission Valley real estate, where he's in the process, actually late in the process, of getting permits to build 200 luxury apartments right there along the San Diego River.
Okay, and we're going to get into that in just a second here. But how did Doug Manchester make out financially the deal from when he bought it to now?
Well, pretty good. He spent $110 million back in 2011 for the paper and affiliated publications. Then he bought the North County Times for $12 million, sold the headquarters for $7 million, so that's now he's up to $115. And with an appraised value of the real estate at $43 million, he probably had a capital gain of $10 to $13 million, in addition to the operating earnings he's been able to generate there over the last 3-4 years.
In spite of UTTV, which we'll touch on here in a minute, too. A lot of moving parts in this story. Now, tell us about the new publisher replacing Mr. Manchester. Who is he? A little thumbnail on him.
Well, his name is Austin Buettner. He is an incredibly accomplished gentleman. He was the youngest partner at Blackstone Group at age 29, a private equity group that's the biggest in the world now. And he was the co-founder of Evercore, which is another group that his specialty was media acquisitions, turnarounds, buyouts, debt financing. So here's somebody who really knows the business, and he has been publisher of the Los Angeles Times since August.
And he'll keep both those posts as we move forward. I did want to jump in here. Right here, we have a bite from the new publisher. Let's see what he says generally about the plans.
No plans to change anything other than make it better. We cover, for instance, in Los Angeles, have a dedicated team looking at the drought. And I know there's a team looking at the Union Tribune at the drought. I'm going to ask those teams to work together, and rather than trip over each other, to see, can we do twice as much? Can we explain something better than we have? Can we tell a story in a different way? So readers should expect to see no real changes, but maybe more.
So what about the editor? Jeff Light has been the editor. Is he going to remain in that post?
Nothing has been made specifically public about Jeff Light's role. Mr. Buettner did say that there was going to be separate newsrooms, a separate editorial policy. The quote was, "I check my opinions at the door." Although he is a member of the editorial board at the Los Angeles Times, I'm not sure at this point whether he would also be down in San Diego County. But he understands the importance of the local brand. I don't think there's any plans anytime soon to just simply fold the San Diego Union Tribune into the Los Angeles Times as an addition or a wraparound or something like that.
Well, you touch on something, the editorial policy. I mean, certainly, I think any objective person would say the LA Times is more liberal editorially on their page than certainly Manchester's UT, which was very conservative, and they had been under the Copleys and other owners. Do you think that will continue, or who knows at this point regarding the editorial page?
Then again, Buettner is a very sophisticated guy. He knows this business. You have the ability to buy the Los Angeles Times in San Diego County today, and some people do. Other people want the Union Tribune. So his strategy is to maintain both of those very valuable brands and as he just said on the segment there, he wants to expand it if possible.
Okay. Gene, you and I are both veterans, worked there way back when. You way back when. You've been in TV here a long time.
I've forgotten already.
Me more recently here. Do you expect to see something different when you pick up the UT in a couple of months from now, or is it going to be kind of the same sort of thing?
Well, hearing what Dan is telling me, I guess we should maybe rule that out in the next couple of months. I just want to know, is it going to evolve? Because I've got to imagine there are a lot of readers here that read the UT grudgingly because it is the paper here, and I've heard a lot of sentiment around town for years. Gee, it'd be great if somebody came in and buy it. LA Times, well, obviously what used to be the Copley brand and then Platinum and now Manchester, there are folks who believe, well, marching forward, this town is changing. It's no longer a red state town, county more so. I think a lot of people would welcome a new editorial wind up in the higher echelons of the office, and it may be something that would be considered by the LA Times, but I don't think, would you imagine that they would make some fast moves in that direction?
Well, if you think about what happened when Platinum Equity bought the paper from the Copley family, Jeff Light and his team set up community outreach efforts. They tried to steer the opinion page toward a more moderate, centrist approach to editorial policy, the opinion part of it at least. And then when Manchester came in, he tacked it to the right again. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if it moved again toward the center. But I'm not privy to any special knowledge. I'm on the news desk, and at all credible newspapers, we move heaven and earth to keep those separate. Big wall between them. Let me, on that point here, we'll talk for a minute about Manchester's somewhat controversial reign. He was fond of front-page editorials. Some backed favored candidates like Carl DeMaio, others pet projects. And we do have another bite here from the new publisher. Let's see what he says about the front-page editorials.
They're a thing of the past. I check my politics at the door. You can expect, and all San Diegans can expect, to see first and foremost news and information that's authentic based on the facts, and opinions that are consistent with the community but inform the community beyond just he said, she said, or we like it, we don't like it.
All right. I also wonder, in the flag, that's the the actual name of the paper on the front page every day, you've got America's finest city in the world, greatest country in the world, or something of that effect. Does that go away? Does the name of the paper change itself too?
I wouldn't be surprised to see that go away. Austin Buettner is a newspaper junkie. He reads 5 newspapers a day. Now it'll be 6, he tells me. And he is also a fan of tradition. He's a change agent who appreciates tradition. And he said they will be studying seriously dropping the UT San Diego name, which is new, and going back to the old San Diego Union-Tribune.
The longtime brand. I want to bring Mario in here. Of course, you work for an alternative publication, an online Voice of San Diego outfit here, and Scott Lewis, I think, had a story today on this whole development, the sale of the UT. What's the talk in your shop over there on this?
Well, I mean, I think we've all been watching the developments over the past year, and from my standpoint, I don't want to talk about Voice or even Scott's opinions, but I mean, I think we all realize the need and the importance for a paper like UT San Diego, to the paper that's been UT, to keep going. I mean, I think the better your stories are, the better our stories are. So, I mean, we've got some optimism, that this will turn out some better news, and which in turn will make us better.
Okay. Now, the site, we had touched on this a little bit, the site there in Mission Valley, people are pretty familiar with it. You can see it from the freeway. It's kind of an iconic site there. And that real estate, as you noted at the outset, is not part of this deal. So we're going to see the journalists who work out of that Mission Valley site go away, and the paper won't be published there in their big printing press that they have there anymore. So those are big changes for the staff.
The deal, as I understand it, which is supposed to close before June 30th, involves a short-term lease, and the term short-term is used advisedly. So yes, I think there's going to be immediate plans to relocate the staff and the printing operation. And it's hard to fail to notice that the Los Angeles Times has the biggest printing plant in the United States. And after the circulation losses over the last 10, 20 years, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they have a very high-quality press line.
And capacity to do it. Yeah.
Capacity, just sitting there waiting for crew.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure. Of course I'm not sure. I'm not even sure they're sure. But it certainly won't be printed in Mission Valley. Whether it's printed all the way up in Los Angeles remains to be seen.
Now, one notable thing about the Manchester era here was UT San Diego. They had spent a lot of money on a newsroom, state-of-the-art TV studio, hired a lot of staff, did a lot of their stories on TV. It kind of went nowhere. Nobody could find it on the cable channels. It finally was kicked to the curb, I don't know, a year or two ago. Were they still profitable despite everything they tried to invest and get that TV operation off the ground?
The paper was profitable. It's among the more profitable papers in the United States, according to the owner, and it's a privately held company, so he doesn't have to show us his books. But given the multiple that Manchester was paid for that paper, I believe him.
Okay, and the new company, now this will end, as you noted in your story, I believe it was 146 years of private ownership of this newspaper company in San Diego.
Yes.
It's going to be owned by the Tribune Company, a publicly traded company now, right?
Yes, Tribune Publishing is a publicly traded company. It has a lot of newspaper assets. That will lead to some efficiencies. The headquarters can do some things that the units can't do. It, in theory, could add more resources to the news gathering down here. And that's the big question. You know, Mario hit it on the head. It's whether news is going to be viable in the next 10, 20 years with all of the digital competition is really an open question. And at the end of the day, this strategy is about trying to sustain local, national, and regional news here in Southern California.
It'll certainly be fascinating going forward, and I'm sure we'll all be doing more stories and more observations about this. Well, we're going to shift gears now. Billions in construction bonds for San Diego schools were approved by voters in 2008 and again in 2012 for things like repairing roofs and modernizing classrooms, installing air conditioning. Some of that's being done, but a huge amount of money so far has been spent on football stadiums and athletic facilities. Mario, start by telling us how much money we're talking about here. It's a big chunk of change that was available for school construction or reconstruction, as it were.
Sure. So there's two major bonds that are coming together. There's Prop S, which was passed in 2008, and then there's Prop Z, which is 2012. So taken together, it's about $5 billion. Now, they don't have $5 billion all at once to spend. That will be every couple of years they sell more bonds and get more money available. So we were taking a look at where the money's gone so far, and we see that about $924 million of what's been available has been spent. Like you said, a lot has gone to minor repairs or major repairs across the schools, but a good chunk of that money, $107 million, has been going to stadiums and athletic facilities. So we're trying to ask questions and find some answers as to why that's happening. Why are these being prioritized while repairs wait in backlog?
Right, and you started your story with an interesting anecdote about a chronic leak at Hoover High, and tell us about that. How is that emblematic of the district's priorities?
Yeah, I just think that like you said, it's emblematic. I think that it says a lot. I took a visit to Hoover High, and it wasn't that this principal at Hoover High had called me to complain. I had gone to the school and asked to see about the Prop S, Prop Z projects that were underway. And he showed me the stadium, and he said, well, there's this leak that I got to show you too, or we've got these pictures of this leak. So I think it really speaks to the fact that we have this crack in a wall where water runs through into the classroom. That
when it rains, it actually pours on the kids.
Right. It's seemingly a minor fix that could have been done 7 years ago when the money first started coming in, and yet water's still coming in, and there's a new stadium out front.
So you got this gleaming new football field there, and we can't keep the kids from having buckets in the classroom when it rains. Well, fortunately, it hasn't rained much here, at least for that
right.
for that aspect of it. Now, what is the status of repairs and need replacements? Some have been done, as you say, but there's these general site plans, really, that have to come into play for each of these campuses and what needs to be done, right?
Right. There's something called a whole site modernization, which is a plan, a project at individual schools where they take sort of a campus-wide approach to the repairs. And most of those are scheduled for the future, like 2017 and beyond. So when we look at the timeline, it's interesting that those are scheduled for the future, but yet these athletic facilities are sort of front-loaded.
Mm-hmm. And your story also noted we might wait 10 years to see an upgrade in air conditioning in classrooms that are pretty hard to learn in right now on hot days.
Right. I mean, the district's plan a couple of years ago was to air condition the 2,000 hottest classrooms in the district, which they figured by, well, how do you determine which zones are the hottest? And And they had some factors that they considered for that. But that doesn't put air conditioners in every school, so some of those are going to have to wait.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the football stadiums and the facilities here. We're getting some gleaming new stadiums, artificial turf, nice tracks, weight rooms, other things you described here. How do we get that priority when we've got all these other things that are backlogged and really kind of need fixing in the classrooms?
Well, first, I should say that the stadiums look great.
Oh, they're nice. They're gleaming. All right.
They're beautiful stadiums.
Yeah. New lights. I mean, it's terrific.
Yeah. So there are a lot of reasons. There are some reasons that come into play. The major one, I think not everybody understands that it's the school board that sets the priorities and determines which projects are going to go first. The reasons that they prioritize the stadiums we're hearing is the major one is equity. Right, so these stadiums aren't just about football games; they're also about they have Phi-Ed classes in the stadiums and the athletic facilities, and it's not fair for one school to have a really nice facility while these other schools have to wait. So it's about bringing equity in. There's also some reasons that look closer to curb appeal. Right, we have one person that sits on the independent oversight committee said, well, repairs aren't sexy, but stadiums are sexy. I mean, those are the things that we can take pictures of and have a ribbon cutting ceremony for, and parents and kids get excited for that. So I think that certainly comes into play.
Now, you speak of parents and kids and principals. Aren't we hearing, gee, wouldn't you think that there'd be some griping about, hey, what about the gleaming stadium here and my kid's got a bucket next to her desk?
Yeah, and I'm hearing people say, well, if you've got a nice stadium, you're going to have higher test scores and GPAs and things like that. I'm just struck by what seems to be, as it is in real life, the tail wags the dog mentality of bread and circuses. I mean, here in San Diego, we're worrying about $1 billion football stadium when there's $1 billion infrastructure deficit in the city, and it's like, wow, that's everybody loves a football hero. So I'm just wondering if they put this kind of approach to classrooms, would that also raise GPAs and test scores? I mean, if they took academics over athletics.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we talk about things like equity, and it would seem that equity would be just as well served if we made the classrooms really nice across all classrooms.
And they're comfortable, at least, so the kids can.
For me, this highlights a pretty important structural fiscal issue. You shouldn't fix a leaky roof with a 30-year home equity loan. You certainly shouldn't buy iPads and groceries with a home equity loan. Mm-hmm. And that's what our schools are doing. And you can argue about whether a football stadium or iPads is an appropriate use. And these maintenance budgets for ongoing maintenance are usually a separate part of the budget. And then bond issues occasionally get money peeled off to do maintenance. But you really don't want to be relying on 30-year, 40-year bonds in some cases to do maintenance. It's just not prudent. A family wouldn't do it. School districts shouldn't do it.
So the whole approach may have to really be looked at.
Well, this highlights that fundamental problem, that you shouldn't be fixing stuff with long-term debt. You should be doing that with your ongoing, the money you get every year.
Right, and I mean, the district does say that they're putting a small chunk of that money away for the repairs and for the structural repairs down the road. But I think you bring up a great point, which is that there's no guarantee that all the projects on the list that voters approved are going to get done. And if you choose the stadiums first, what's to say that these classrooms and these things that really do need to be fixed...
And the money runs out.
Right.
All right, well, let's go on to a different topic regarding fixing things and backlogs. It's not just the schools that have a big maintenance backlog. Some buildings in Balboa Park are in such sorry shape that plaster has fallen on visitors. And last Sunday, the problem came into sharp focus with the closing of several attractions due to a sewage backup. Start there. What happened on Sunday out there at the park?
Well, it was traced to a sewer backup. You've got old and very long sewer lines and trees with deep roots, and every now and then they break through and things back up. It's just, to use that word, emblematic of what's been going on for decades here. You don't point it at this administration, but it seems that a lot of this has just been based on a management, or at least, let's just say, a business approach with municipal government of delay and denial, and wait till things fall apart, as opposed to taking preventive, proactive maintenance, upgrades and upkeep. You do it reactively when things fall apart. And these are 100-year-old buildings. I mean, they go back before the actual centennial celebration of 1915, and they're tinder boxes, as we saw in 1978-79 when the Aerospace Museum and the Old Globe went up. So you've got to account for that, and they really haven't.
Now, the $300 million figure that's tossed around, is that accurate, or who knows? Is that a best guess?
People actually believe it's north of that.
And that would be, again, to cover the maintenance backlog that's needed in the park.
Exactly. And the irony here was that $3 million was dedicated to the budget of the ill-fated Balboa Park Centennial Incorporated. Yeah, and that was more smoke and mirrors that produced nothing, and it dwarfed the budget, the annual upkeep and maintenance budget of the park. And if that had been invested, and it's still a drop in the bucket. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars probably that's needed here. And what's happening is a lot of the tenant institutions, the 24 museums and other operations, are taking this upon themselves. They not only take care of their own spaces, but they're having to do the leasehold, the common properties. And it's a real challenge when that place is swarmed on by the homeless. They are a big problem too, both structurally and the trash, human waste, and vandalism, break-ins, and things like that. And
it is our jewel. And you noted in your story that it's not just the city's jewel. There's the people from all over the region, of course, tourists here, the state.
Oh my gosh,
they've looked at, should we be looking at more of a regional funding plan, a statewide plan for Balboa Park?
Now, there's an idea. There's an idea. And the hope is that possibly all these needs, or a lot of these needs, could be prioritized on a mega bond issue that's going to come up in 2016. The problem is you're also fighting, there's a $150 million backlog in Mission Bay Park. It's going to be competing with, for instance, the Chargers thing, unless they put it on a special ballot this year, and that's very iffy. The minimum wage, when do you parse these out so the voters go, wait a minute, the hands are out, how deep are my pockets?
Dan, are we seeing the same problem here as you mentioned with the schools earlier here?
We're seeing the same pattern. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of political will year in and year out to actually maintain things and improve them efficiently. Politically, it's just a lot easier to let something crumble into dust in 20 or 30 years and then to get a bond issue to build it new. Now, historic buildings are a separate case because you really have to keep those up. And year in and year out, that's very tough to do politically. There's just not much appetite. You don't see politicians running on, I fixed the sewers.
Now there had been a proposal floating around for about a decade to broaden the tax paid by real estate owners that's been in place since the 30s to fund the zoo, but specifically the zoo. Right. And what happened with that? Can we use some of that money on the park?
Well, the lawyers have looked at it, and it's probably a non-starter in the near term, if at all. The problem is about $12 million a year is flowing into the zoo, but the original intent of this is to go to the animal enclosures in the zoo, not the zoo or the park beyond it. And so that's a big problem. And they've looked into it and said, yeah, you could probably pass a charter amendment. And even that is maybe a bridge too far. But state law comes in with sort of an ad valorem tax limitations. In other words, it's a catch-22.
Ad valorem being a tax on real estate.
So it may take a state constitutional amendment. And with the legislature, they're going, oh my gosh, a set-aside for this one thing, it's just looking like a non-starter at this point. Although maybe you could go to court with it, but then lawyers and politics. It's
Now
it's a hard go.
We touched on this. Much has been made of the roughly $2 billion needed to repair city streets, sewer lines, water lines, whatnot. Does Mayor Faulkner's budget, which is being haggled out and it may revise now, and the hearings coming up, does it talk at all about the park, or is that just overlooked in light of everything else?
Well, it seems to me it is behind a door. It's left behind a door. It is not a huge priority. To the extent that they can buff out the budget, it is still a drop in the bucket for the needs.
Now, what about on the council side? Councilman Todd Gloria has represented this area in the park. What's he got to say about all of this?
Well, yeah, he is very proactive on it, and he is making more noise. When I quizzed him for my story, it came back, and he actually cited the independent budget analysts' approach that this needs a lot of improvement, this budget, for infrastructure in general, but he didn't mention so much Balboa Park, but he kicked the mayor in the shins with that, saying this is no plan.
But this becomes a very visible thing, because as we noted, so many people in San Diego, visitors from all over the world, go to the zoo, go to the park, and all of these facilities. We are going to have some sort of party here, maybe not the $3 million bash, so it's visible. We can't have plaster falling on tourists' heads.
Or structural things too. What is happening is the tenants are stepping to the plate. They are raising money, the Balboa Park Conservancy, for the Botanical Gardens building. Also, the grassroots celebration has come together and said, we are going to support you not only in each of your institutional celebrations, but we're going to try to do this. It's going to take a village to raise this child, Balboa Park, and it is not a child. It is long since a senior citizen, and it's going to take a village approach, and they need to drag governments all around San Diego kicking and screaming into the fight.
Okay, a few seconds left. Maybe a fee on visitors to the various museums, some sort of surcharge on the activities there?
Oh boy, everybody likes to reach into their pockets, but you know, this is a sacred cow. If we talk it, it's a jewel, a regional resource. Maybe there can be some guilting and shaming for that purpose.
For that, indeed. All right, well, we'll see what happens as we go forward with that one. And that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Dan McSwain of UT San Diego, Mario Caran of Voice of San Diego, and Gene Cubison of NBC7 San Diego. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. And a programming note, next week the Roundtable will be devoted to coverage of the California drought, current problems, how we're dealing with them, and what the future may hold. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.